take off, take flight with you. For we never fly, but we're flying.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Take Flight Takes, episode number 82 with Pabilo Timbo. And today actually I want to speak to you about and put some words around the importance of building wealth with your spouse. And maybe share, a little bit of some personal examples and experiences on doing this. And I've got some tips that I think will be useful for those people that are interested in this space. So before I get started, I just want to remind you on what Take Flight Takes is all about. It's a 10-minute segment from each of the Take Flight members on a topic that they think is most valuable that they'll like to bring to you, the listener, that they think will really help to provide additional reflections in your journey. So before we get started, I think, for many of you that have been listening to the Take Flight episodes would know that, I'm a big advocate of creating wealth. And I'm also an even bigger advocate of being able to do that, with your family and with your spouse, because I think it's so important to build that journey together. And I just wanted to touch on a few topics, to touch on a few points around this. So I think the first one is, I think we've all heard the saying that if you want to go fast, you can go alone. If you want to go further, go together. And that couldn't be any more true. And what I've experienced in the last few years in doing it, in sort of building that wealth with my wife. And one of the things I feel like is it's not spoken about enough, right? We hear a lot of saying around, show me your friends, show me your 5 friends, and I'll show you who you are. But I don't necessarily get as much. I don't hear as much context or literature around, the importance of the conversations that you're having with your wife. And I think, we should start saying, show me the conversations you're having with your wife, and I'll show you what kind of future you're sort of building towards. And I think, honestly, it's one of the most important pieces on your chessboard, especially in your journey in sort of building wealth. So before maybe I share some more points and context, I think I'll give a bit of background for some of the listeners. I've been with my wife now in total for about 16 years. Of that, we've been together for 13 years and married for 3 years. So we've been together, before, we both started even earning any money. And whilst some people may listen to that and think, well, it must be easy for you because you've been together for so long. Actually, it's not. What I find is that in the context of building wealth with your spouse, you still have to be very intentional about doing it together, right? And very intentional about some of the things I'm going to talk about, because it's not a given. And when you have everything else that you're trying to balance, right? Yourself, your work, the kids, how do you still stay true to some of the principles that you want to apply and still make sure that you do it together? So for me, what I've experienced, what I wanted to share is, one of the first things is, I think it shouldn't be overlooked, but I think it's important to make the decision together, and to continuously keep revisiting the commitment, right, on doing it together. So you can decide with your spouse, in 2021, we want to go on a journey and create wealth. But that's obviously going to present some challenges and opportunities along the way. Do you still feel the same in 2022? Do you still feel the same in 2023? So I think it's really important to ensure that the commitment on doing this is not overlooked and constantly kept looking into. So myself and my wife, we're always talking about, how committed are we to continuously doing and meeting our targets and our vision. The second one is about, it's really important to have a good understanding on the roles and responsibilities. So, and what I found in my personal experience with Lauren is, one of my roles is to sort of, do more the physical part of that wealth building. So going out there and looking for deals and speaking to the relevant stakeholders and service providers to get deals over the line. Lauren helps with some of the analyzing and calculating of deals. But what's also important with good understanding of roles and responsibilities, what happens is you don't necessarily get in each other's way. And what I found is Lauren creates great space for me to go out there and execute, right? So if we didn't have a discussion on who does what at times when it matters, we'd be butting heads, and there wouldn't necessarily be the space. So let's say, for example, I need to work a late night or two. That's understood by Lauren, right? So we're not having a discussion as to why I'm working late. So I think that speaks to the sort of roles and responsibilities. The other thing that I think has been really helpful in our journey is learning together, right? It's very easy for me to take on personal development courses myself. It's very easy for me to go on and watch content and develop my mind as the male part by myself. But it's not as much fun if you do it with your spouse. And I think whilst I talk about the commitment, I talk about the roles and responsibilities, you want to build the mindset together. So as you guys know from my Instagram page, I'm a big advocate in sort of using the whiteboard. So we use the whiteboard a lot at home, right? You know, jotting ideas and building out visions and sort of when an idea comes to mind, let's put it on the whiteboard and try and, you know, hash it out and see, you know, what makes sense. So I think these are the three things that actually we do a lot and have worked for us. And I would sort of, you know, advise to people that are really, you know, interested in wanting to build wealth with their spouse. I've got 3 other tips that I wanted to share before I closed. And these 3 tips are areas which myself and my wife are doing, but I have to continuously pay attention to make sure that we're doing this well, because I think also it's very important. The first one is about, I think the only way you can get good at doing this with your spouse is transparency. So, the whole idea of, separate accounts for me personally, doesn't make sense or doesn't work. I think full transparency in terms of how much both of you are earning, what you're bringing to the table. I don't see it as a situation of I earn X, she earns Y. It's really what do we earn as a collective? What do we earn together? What's our net worth together? How many assets do we earn together? So transparency is absolute key. And I think reason why transparency is key, because for me, when I'm not there, Lauren needs to know exactly what our dealings are, what our securities are, our balances are, so she has the understanding, right? And so when we're having a conversation, we're actually on the same page, and I'm not talking about a number that she's not quite aware of. So I think transparency is absolutely important, and something I would sort of suggest and advise people to take into consideration. The second one is communication. Not only, I mean, communication is big for relationships, but it's really, really important in this particular space, because you want to communicate, the ups and the downs. And you don't want to just communicate when you've actually won or done something well, or you've actually secured a deal. If there's an issue for example, I'll give you an example. If there's an issue with a property, not to just go and fix it and tell wife after the fact. I'll let Lauren know, look, we have this issue that we have to look into. It's maybe going to cost X and Y, just so you're aware. If we've done something well, also to communicate. So I think high communication, and how you communicate, when you communicate, right, I think is very important, because it's also about ensuring that you're both in a position that you actually want to listen to what is being said. All right. So when you communicate certain things is also important. And the very last thing I'll say, actually, which I think this actually is a really critical piece that I pay attention to a lot, and that's actually influence, right? Either whether you're male or the female, either or in the relationship, your ability to influence the other person in why this still makes sense, right? Because as you're creating wealth, you're also creating a certain level of risk. And what I find is that women have high emotional intelligence, and they know exactly, way before you do as a male, for example, when potentially you're taking on a bit too much risk. You think you've got it covered, you think it's calculated, but they can sense, hang on, maybe the balance is not quite right here. Are we taking on more than we can chew? So for me, what I find a critical piece is being able to influence Lauren in saying, look, this still makes sense. And one of the things that has helped me to influence is results, right? So now I'm speaking from a male perspective. So it's one thing you can talk until the cows come home, but do you have the results in order to back up, the vision and the plan? So I don't underestimate just because I'm married to Lauren doesn't necessarily mean that she has to go along with what I'm basically saying or what I'm proposing. I still pay attention to the ability to sell the idea that this makes sense, sell the idea of sacrifice, discipline, because it's going to pay off at a later stage. So those are just a couple points on my experiences, a couple points on some tips around the ideas and the conversations around what it takes to sort of build wealth with your spouse. It's a learning journey. It's a journey that we're constantly learning about. We haven't perfected. And I just thought I wanted to sort of take some time out and share that with you. So And if you've got any thoughts or any questions around this, would love to engage in a discussion. You can actually start commenting on some of the posts we'll start to put out on the Take Flight podcast page on Instagram. And I think it'll be a really, really good, useful dialogue to have. That's episode number 82 from Pabilo Timbo on Take Flight Takes.
Take off, take flight with you. Yeah, for we never fly, but